He was one of the most gifted scorers the game has ever seen, a basketball artist capable of magic on any given night. But everywhere Kyrie Irving went, controversy followed close behind. This isn't just a story about talent. It's about belief, conflict, and the storm that never stopped chasing him. Welcome to Off-Court Truths, where we dive beyond the highlights to uncover the conflicts, convictions, and controversies that shape basketball's most misunderstood stars. Kyrie Irving entered the NBA as a prodigy. From the moment he stepped onto the court at Duke, it was clear his handle, touch, and creativity existed on a different level. Drafted first overall in 2011, Kyrie quickly became the face of a rebuilding Cleveland franchise, dazzling fans with impossible finishes and a fearless scoring instinct. His talent felt effortless, almost spiritual. Basketball for Kyrie wasn't just a sport, it was expression. At his peak, he delivered one of the most iconic shots in NBA history, sealing a championship for Cleveland in 2016 alongside LeBron James. In that moment, Kyrie wasn't just a star, he was immortal. Yet even then, tension simmered beneath the surface. Kyrie wanted more than winning. He wanted meaning. He wanted autonomy. He wanted to be seen not just as a sidekick, but as a leader of his own destiny. That search pushed him from Cleveland to Boston and later to Brooklyn, each move framed as a quest for self-discovery. But with every new chapter, questions followed. Teammates struggled to understand him. Coaches hesitated to trust him. Fans admired his brilliance but grew confused by his unpredictability. Kyrie spoke openly about belief systems, personal truths, and standing apart from convention, ideas that resonated deeply with some and alienated others. What made Kyrie Irving unique also made him volatile. The same mind that created magic with the ball questioned everything around it. And as his career unfolded, talent was no longer the central conversation. The storm around Kyrie, built from conviction, controversy, and consequence, began to define him just as much as his greatness ever did. The breaking point in Kyrie Irving's career came when personal conviction collided head-on with public responsibility. During his time in Brooklyn, the tension that had followed him quietly for years finally erupted into full view. Injuries had already limited his availability, and questions about leadership were growing louder. But everything escalated when league health mandates placed Kyrie at the center of a debate far larger than basketball itself. Kyrie chose to stand by his personal beliefs, refusing to comply with local requirements that would allow him to play home games. He framed the decision as one of principle, autonomy, and conscience. To him, it was about personal truth. To the Nets, it was about availability, commitment, and team cohesion. To the NBA, it became a test of how far individual belief could stretch within a collective league. The fallout was immediate. Kyrie was ruled ineligible for games. The Nets initially removed him from all team activities. Teammates were placed in impossible positions, forced to answer questions they didn't create. Media narratives hardened, painting Kyrie as unreliable, defiant, or disconnected. Fans split into camps. Those who admired his willingness to stand alone, and those who felt he had abandoned his responsibility to the team. For the first time, Kyrie Irving wasn't just controversial, he was absent. And in that absence, the storm that had always followed him finally swallowed the basketball conversation entirely. Kyrie Irving's career is best understood as a series of brilliant peaks interrupted by growing storms, each louder, more complex, and more consequential than the last. The timeline of his controversies doesn't begin in Brooklyn. It stretches back to the earliest moments when his search for meaning began to clash with the rigid expectations of professional basketball. The first phase was promise. In Cleveland, Kyrie was the franchise. Night after night, he carried an undermanned roster with skill few guards in league history possessed. His handle felt supernatural. His finishing defied physics. When LeBron James returned in 2014, Kyrie finally had the stage to compete for something larger than individual excellence. The partnership delivered a championship in 2016, capped by the shot that will live forever in NBA lore. But behind the celebration, Kyrie felt incomplete. According to later interviews, he struggled with identity, feeling overshadowed and unheard. Winning, paradoxically, made him question himself even more. That uncertainty triggered the next phase, separation. Kyrie requested a trade to Boston, seeking leadership and autonomy. The move was framed as growth, but it quickly exposed fractures. Injuries limited his availability, and when he returned, chemistry never fully formed. Public comments about leadership, young teammates, and responsibility created tension inside the locker room. The Celtics' early playoff success without him only deepened the narrative that Kyrie complicated environments rather than elevating them. By the time he departed Boston, the Storm had gained momentum. Brooklyn was supposed to be different. Reuniting with Kevin Durant promised freedom, understanding, and alignment. For a brief moment, it worked. But then came injuries, absences, and the collision between personal belief and league structure. Kyrie's refusal to comply with local mandates sidelined him for months. The Nets attempted compromise, allowing him to play only road games before reversing course. Each adjustment fed confusion. The franchise wavered. Teammates adjusted. The league watched closely. The controversy intensified when Kyrie shared a link on social media that sparked widespread backlash. What followed was one of the most turbulent stretches of his career. The Nets suspended him. Sponsors distanced themselves. Public debate escalated beyond basketball into culture, belief, and accountability. Kyrie issued statements, participated in conversations, and eventually returned to the court. But the damage lingered. For many fans, trust had eroded. For organizations, patience had thinned. By the time Kyrie was traded to Dallas, the narrative had hardened. The league no longer questioned his talent. It questioned his reliability. Each stop had followed the same arc: brilliance, tension, controversy, departure. The timeline revealed a pattern not of malice, but of misalignment between a player searching for truth and a league demanding consistency. Throughout it all, Kyrie continued to play at an elite level. His skill never faded. What changed was the context. Every action carried historical weight. Every decision was filtered through past storms. The timeline wasn't about one controversy, it was about accumulation. Small moments stacked into defining chapters, each one narrowing the space between Kyrie Irving the artist and Kyrie Irving the liability. This is how the Storm followed him everywhere. Not because he chased chaos, but because his need to stand apart repeatedly collided with systems built on conformity. And by this point in the timeline, the question was no longer whether Kyrie Irving could coexist with the NBA. It was whether either side was willing or able to bend any further. To understand why controversy followed Kyrie Irving everywhere, you have to understand the psychology of a man who never stopped searching for meaning. Kyrie was not driven solely by competition or validation. He was driven by curiosity, identity, and a deep need to live according to his own internal logic. From early in his career, he questioned authority, narratives, and structures that told him who he was supposed to be. That questioning in isolation is not destructive, but inside a league that values predictability and alignment, it became combustible. Kyrie's intelligence and introspection set him apart from most athletes. He read deeply, spoke philosophically, and framed life through belief rather than consensus. But that same mindset made compromise difficult. When faced with pressure, Kyrie didn't bend. He withdrew. Absence became his form of resistance. To him, stepping away was a way to protect authenticity. To teams and fans, it looked like abandonment. There is also the psychology of trust. Kyrie struggled to feel understood within organizations built around hierarchy and messaging. Each misunderstanding reinforced his sense that institutions cared more about control than people. Over time, this created a feedback loop. The more the league pushed for conformity, the more Kyrie leaned into independence. Each controversy hardened both sides. At his core, Kyrie Irving wasn't trying to provoke chaos. He was trying to live honestly in a space that rarely allows honesty without consequence. The tragedy is that the same self-awareness that fueled his creativity on the court isolated him off it. In the NBA, talent opens doors, but alignment keeps them open. Kyrie's psychological battle was never about basketball skill. It was about whether individuality could survive inside a system that demands unity. The climax of Kyrie Irving's storm arrived when belief, reputation, and consequence collided at once. After months of tension in Brooklyn, the situation reached a point where ambiguity was no longer possible. The Nets were no longer balancing talent against disruption. They were choosing between the stability and uncertainty. And for Kyrie, the moment forced a realization he had spent years avoiding. Convictions, no matter how sincerely held, do not exist in a vacuum. When the organization suspended him following another controversy tied to his public actions, the fallout was immediate and unforgiving. Sponsors severed ties. The league distanced itself. Teammates spoke carefully, walking a tightrope between support and exhaustion. The conversation was no longer about basketball philosophy or free thought. It was about accountability, responsibility, and the limits of tolerance in a global league. For Kyrie, the moment was deeply personal. He felt misunderstood, reduced to headlines, and stripped of nuance. In his mind, the world was reacting to fragments rather than intent. But intent no longer mattered. The impact had already been felt. The Nets imposed conditions for his return, signaling that trust had to be rebuilt, not assumed. It was the first time in his career that his talent alone could not force a resolution. This was the edge Kyrie had been approaching for years. Not a benching, not a trade rumor, but a moment where the NBA drew a clear boundary and refused to negotiate it away. The storm that followed him everywhere had finally reached its loudest point, leaving him to confront an uncomfortable truth. Standing alone comes with a cost, and sometimes that cost is control over your own career. In that silence between games, Kyrie Irving faced the question he could no longer avoid. How much was he willing to lose in order to remain himself? The consequences of Kyrie Irving's choices unfolded with a finality that no crossover, no clutch shot, no highlight could undo. Professionally, the trust between Kyrie and organizations eroded to a point of no return. In Brooklyn, the Nets no longer viewed him as a pillar. They saw volatility. The franchise that once bet everything on alignment between stars chose stability over uncertainty, and Kyrie was traded. The move wasn't framed as a basketball decision alone. It was a cultural reset. Financially, the fallout was significant. Endorsement relationships dissolved, costing Kyrie millions and signaling how far perception had shifted. Sponsors that once celebrated his individuality now feared association with controversy. In the modern NBA, where image and marketability move as fast as talent, Kyrie's reputation became a liability rather than an asset. Public opinion hardened. Some fans stood by him, admiring his refusal to bend. Others felt exhausted by what they saw as self-inflicted chaos. Media narratives stopped asking why Kyrie acted the way he did and began asking how long teams would tolerate it. Every conversation about his game now came with qualifiers: availability, reliability, distraction. Inside locker rooms, the impact was quieter but deeper. Teammates adjusted expectations. Coaches simplified roles. Leadership, once assumed because of talent, had to be earned through presence. Kyrie was no longer judged by what he could do on a given night, but by whether he would be there at all. The NBA didn't take Kyrie's talent away. It stripped away the protection that talent once provided. And in doing so, it made clear that brilliance can open doors, but it cannot keep them open when trust collapses. Kyrie Irving's comeback was never about repairing an image. It was about regaining control of his career in a league that had grown wary of him. When he arrived in Dallas, the expectations were quieter but sharper. The Mavericks weren't asking Kyrie to be a philosopher, a spokesperson, or a symbol. They wanted availability, consistency, basketball. For the first time in years, the path forward was simple, even if the history behind it was anything but. On the court, Kyrie reminded everyone why the conversation never fully leaves his talent. The handle was still surgical. The shot-making still felt impossible. In crucial moments, he delivered with the calm confidence that once made him championship-tested. Teammates spoke about his professionalism. Coaches praised his preparation. There were fewer headlines, fewer explanations, fewer battles fought in public. The noise didn't disappear, but it softened. Off the court, Kyrie adopted a lower profile. Public statements became measured. Social media activity slowed. When he spoke, it was with a noticeable awareness of consequence. He didn't abandon his beliefs, but he learned how to navigate them within boundaries that protected both himself and the team. The change wasn't dramatic, it was deliberate. Fans responded cautiously. Some welcomed the return of the pure basketball artist. Others remained skeptical, waiting for proof that the cycle had truly broken. The NBA too watched without commentary. There were no proclamations of redemption, no league-backed narrative shift. Kyrie's comeback wasn't being marketed, it was being observed. What defined this phase was restraint. Kyrie no longer seemed interested in testing limits for the sake of autonomy. He appeared focused on presence, showing up, playing, competing. In a career defined by extremes, that balance became his most important adjustment. This wasn't a triumphant return to universal admiration. It was something quieter and more fragile, a chance to coexist with the league rather than fight it. And for Kyrie Irving, that coexistence, if it lasted, would represent the most meaningful comeback of all. Kyrie Irving's story challenges one of the NBA's most comfortable assumptions, that talent and intention are enough. They aren't. Genius can elevate a player, but it can also isolate them when conviction refuses compromise. Kyrie showed the world what happens when individuality collides with an ecosystem built on alignment, messaging, and collective trust. His journey is not a simple tale of right or wrong, it is a study in consequence. Beliefs, no matter how sincerely held, ripple outward. Actions do not exist in isolation when millions are watching. Kyrie's career reminds us that authenticity without awareness can become self-sabotage, and that freedom inside a system always comes with boundaries, spoken or not. The lesson is uncomfortable but necessary. Greatness is not just about skill, courage, or self-expression. It is about understanding the environment you operate in and deciding which battles are worth the cost. Kyrie Irving's storm didn't follow him because he lacked talent. It followed him because talent alone could not contain the weight of his choices. Kyrie Irving's story is still unfolding. Comment below which NBA stars rise, controversy, or untold struggle you want us to break down next on Off Court Truths.